Okay, look, I loved this book, The Infinite Miles by Hannah Ferguson. I'm going to tell you why, tell you what it's about, but for some reason, every time I put the camera on, when I start to talk about it, I find myself freezing up, slipping up, wanting to start over because it doesn't sound as natural when I talk to myself about it. Because the truth is, I love this book. It wasn't perfect, but what it was this culmination of all these amazing IPs in a way that didn't just try to milk them for what they're worth, but I think actually did a really good job of respecting all these different things I'm about to point out that we love, to make it a unique and compelling story on its own, despite the fact that it feels like it's just a major cash grab. I mean, this is the type of story that I feel like you'd expect from some major blockbuster studio like, Warner Brothers with its fucking Harry Potter TV series based off the exact same books, the same story, nothing changed. But, I want to make it clear that's not what's happening here. I think Hannah Ferguson has a true love for David Bowie, Doctor Who, Back to the Future, and all things queer. And that is very apparent in this book. So now that I've basically set up what the book's about, let me walk you through this. Let me take you a picture. Imagine a world where the Doctor Who, was actually real. And the Doctor, I mentioned David Bowie, is actually David Bowie. He's famous musician, actor, queer icon, David Bowie. And then add in the fact that he decides to drive a muscle car, akin to the DeLorean from Back to the Future. All of that on its own, it has this tantalizing hint to it. Like you hear that, it's hard not to give it a second glance. Like, oh my God, I want to like that, but it sounds like it's just gonna be just a major crash grab, or trying just to use a bunch of better things to make your thing sound good. That's not this. Like this is someone who loves these works, these different things, and it's very apparent in how the story is crafted. It pulls on the things that we know and love about these different IPs, or in this case, a real person, David Bowie, and sort of interwoves them and creates a something that seems cohesive but also unique and actually fully realized, not something that's just a copy of something better. So when I say that I loved this book, I loved a story that was basically the Doctor, David Bowie, traveling to DeLorean through space with his companions to try and make the world, the universe, a better place. With all that said, let's talk about the actual book, what the book actually covers, and we'll see whether or not it's a book that you'll like. But at this point, I feel like all you need is that premise. And I guess a little bit of trust in me that it actually does the IPs justice to really want to read this. With that said, I want to walk you through the nuances of where it fails, but also how I think it succeeds and makes itself its own work. So part of the story of this setup that I described to you is presenting it at face value. We have certain expectations about David Bowie, about the Doctor, the time, the TARDIS, whatever, and of course of the DeLorean, and of time travel, and just at the core, this is mostly, I think, a Doctor Who type story. More like you're letting David Bowie act as the Doctor in a car that looks like the DeLorean. So at its core, it feels like a Doctor Who show. But part of the reason I think it was unique and why I loved it was because while it begins with that sort of traditional setup, where we introduce this idea of basically this TV show that is Doctor Who, which I should say, make it very clear, all these things that I described to you, David Bowie, the DeLorean, the TARDIS, Doctor Who, they're not called all those things, because obviously those are all very well-known IPs. I imagine there are copyright issues. Instead, we're dealing with something called The Infinite Odyssey, where the musician is Miles something, hence the name, The Infinite Miles. And it starts setting up the world where basically all that's different is just that name. Instead of Doctor Who, we have The Infinite Odyssey. But from there, it quickly diverges. The opening segments of the book introduces us to this woman, Peggy, as she's off in some distant world with quote-unquote Doctor, aka Miles. It's just this really exotic view. And honestly, the first thing I thought to myself was, wow, why can't Doctor Who give me this type of exotic, beautiful world that I really want to see? Because as much as I love Doctor Who, as much adventure as it gives me, there's a level of safeness, or if I'm being kind, or if I'm not being kind, laziness in its creativity of other worlds or other entities. There are so many humanoids, not to mention actual humans or human-like, entities in the universe that is Doctor Who. And then the same is true for the world. All the worlds are identical. We start the book off with this really absurdly different world, and I loved it. Like I thought it was so vividly described, and I just thought to myself, this is the potential Doctor Who could give us, the true adventure that could come with Doctor Who if they would just be willing to go a little bit deeper. And I'm not saying this book is heavy sci-fi. I don't think it is. I just think it does a better job of appreciating the variety of life forms that would exist. Life forms and also environments that would exist. I won't get into detail on the actual direction of the plot or the type of life forms we're introduced to. What I'll say is a tragedy befalls Peggy very quickly. And all we know is she gets dropped off at home by the doctor, aka Miles. Next thing we know, her best friend is talking about how she hasn't seen Peggy in like 3 months. And I believe the family of Peggy is having a funeral. This is all early opening segments of the book, so I don't think it's considered spoilers. And the story really follows her best friend, whose name is Harper. What begins to happen is basically twofold. We have this adventure where Harper is trying to understand what happened to Peggy, while simultaneously beginning to realize the reality that is the Infinite Odyssey, that is Miles, and the deep or the complex web that exists around him and this world that is now real. I forgot to mention Peggy and Harper, that they have since the childhood been best friends, and they have loved the Infinite Odyssey. They've been obsessed. They've gone to basically Doctor Who Infinite Odyssey cons over and over again. They're like the biggest fans. So that's like they playing in here. Like you basically are the perspective of a Doctor Who fan getting to see, to get married and fly with the Doctor. We know early on that Peggy got that experience. Harper is confused. She's trying to understand. The story progresses as she slowly starts to understand things. She begins to learn things, as do we. And the more she learns, the more we learn, the more the mythos that we're used to begins to fall apart. Not in a bad way, but in a unique way, meaning Hannah Ferguson makes this their own story. They take a beloved IP, they ingrain it with the spirit and the heart of that IP, that is Doctor Who, to say Doctor Who, then creates a fully unique world out of it. And I absolutely adored it. It wasn't as simple as saying, let's make Doctor Who real. It's more unique, it's more original, and I really loved it for that reason. And for me, I'm going to be rereading it when it comes out. The audio, I'm really excited to listen to, but when I read this, I read it with my eyes. It's something that I rarely have done over the last several years. I always listen to audio, even text-to-speech. This is a full-fledged novel that I read with my eyes, and I can't think of a better indication of how great this book is, that it was able to keep my attention for like 13, 14 hours of just sitting there reading with my eyes. The level of encapsulation that had to happen there is no small feat for someone like me who just really struggles to read with their eyes versus just doing something else while listening to things. And to me, that was the first time this book was doing something right. And it really is. Now, what I do wonder is whether or not the book will be as good going in, knowing all the mysteries, knowing the revelations. Because in a way, part of the thrill here is learning about the world and learning the mysteries, the secrets. But as I talk about it, as I think about it, even outside of my attempts to record this video, which I'm doing my best here, my point is that I'm loving it. Like, I love the idea of it. I want to return to this world. I want to return to this book. And I really hope it stands up. I really do. As someone who loves David Bowie, Doctor Who, Back to the Future, time travel in general, and not to mention all things queer, not something I've talked about yet. This book is very fucking queer. I love this story. It's way queerer than Doctor Who, that goes without saying. Hannah Ferguson themselves, I believe, is non-binary. I think they go by she, they. And the story itself is full of queer characters. The relationship between Peggy and Harper is not explicitly like sexual, they're friends. But that love they have for each other, there is something there that almost hints that could be something more. And we have to, it's sort of something we're wondering and exploring as the story goes on, while also understanding everyone else in the story. I don't want to reveal like everyone's just gay, because I'm not saying they are, but it's just a casually integrated part of the story. It's something that I love in a story where I had this amazing narrative that I love getting encapsulated into, and it just casually makes queerness, the norm. It just is there. It's a part of the world, and that's what I want. So when I talk about Back to the Future, Doctor Who, it gets all apparent here on the cover, like that rainbow is very suited to the story. It's just so fucking fitting. The cover to me is the perfect encapsulation of what this book is offering. And it's not, I don't think it's a missell. I don't think it's misleading you. I think it's making some promises, some really high level promises, and I think it actually delivers. My only issue I have with this book, they kept me from giving it a pure 5 stars instead of 4.5, is really the way the story went. One of the choices towards the end. And it's a little nuanced because the more I talk about it, the more I think about my problem with the book, because I can't get into it really detailed without spoiling things. But the more I think about my problem with it, the more it occurs to me that maybe I'm being unfair. Because the thing is that the ending was very much foreshadowed. It was very much in line with the mythology or mythos of Doctor Who. Like the way things are resolved is very much Doctor Who. But what I loved about this story, most of all, was that I talked about how Hannah Ferguson basically branches off from the established mythos and begins to recreate it, sort of, or at least in this world, in their world, they're recreating it. And what I loved about it was that it felt more mature. Not that there aren't dark times in Doctor Who, there absolutely are. I've been rewatching Doctor Who, actually, in anticipation for the 60th anniversary. And I tell you what happens to Donna is fucking devastating and just really dark. There's just a level of maturity in this story. It helps they can curse, but even beyond that, the things that happen to Peggy, the things that are infiltrating them, the monsters that are attacking them, it just felt mature in a way that Doctor Who simply can't be as a family show. So it's not a kid's book, to be clear, I should have said that. But to me, when I talk about something being realized, in my mind, you can't have a family-friendly show and it feel entirely real. There's a level of canon that comes with that, and I'm okay with that. I loved this story because it felt like it took something that I love and gave me a view of what it would look like if it was actually real. And then as we get towards the end, while it was still true to the heart of Doctor Who and the type of things that Doctor Who explores, I felt like it sort of went in that sort of less mature direction. And it's the most I can say without really giving away too much. And that huge fixation on this complaint really is minor. Like, I'm still giving the book 4.5, rounding up to 5 stars. Really, you'll have to read it yourself and tell me what you think. Tell me whether or not I'm just being too picky. Because, like I said, it's not as if it's not consistent with Doctor Who and what I expect from Doctor Who. It just wasn't consistent, I guess, with the expectations that were built for me around this version of Doctor Who. But that's the gist of my thoughts here, right? This was a book that I had high expectations for good reason. As you know, it's with great power comes great responsibility. With great IP comes great responsibility, I'm really glad to say it delivered. I love this book. I really hope people give it a shot. It's absolutely worth reading. I mean, it's just so much fun. If you love Doctor Who and David Bowie and Back to the Future, or time travel in general, really, you'll love this, especially fans of Doctor Who, I feel like. That said, of course, people will disagree. I'm sure there are plenty of Doctor Who fans who will be pickier than me, maybe. But for me, I loved it. I love getting the opportunity to explore something I love and see it sort of reimagined. Because that's what this is. It's reimagining. It's not a true to life. At this point, I'm getting repetitive. I just want to make sure it's clear. I love this book. I think you might love it too. It's a lot of fun. Please consider giving it a go. But for now, that is everything that I have to say. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you all have a great day. Stay safe, and I'll see you all next time. Okay? Goodbye.